Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome back to Squeeze Fan TV and another song of the day. And this time I thought I would go for a big old Squeeze favourite, Vicky Verky from 1980s Argybargy. And this is a song which I think is very well loved in Squeeze fandom. It's a song which was in the live set originally. It was played on the 1981 US tour. There are bootleg copies of that available, and it's a song which Glenn still, I think he's been known to perform it off and on in his solo shows and in Squeeze shows too. I think it's a deep cut. It's a song which only hardened Squeeze fans know about. It was never a single, but it's definitely one of those songs which is, it looms large in Squeeze lore. I guess because it's such a great little song, really. It's an acoustic song, doesn't have a chorus. It's driven by these very energetic acoustic guitars, I think. As a song, it really reminds me of the stuff that the Beatles were doing in the mid-60s. It sounds to me like it was deliberately made to sound like something that could have come from, say, the Help album or Rubber Soul. Think of songs like You've Got to Hide Your Love Away or I've Just Seen a Face. That kind of fast strummed acoustic guitar is really, really effective. And it's one of Squeeze's great story songs as well. It's... In fact, I've heard it called, the sequel to Up the Junction. It's another story song about a young couple. But this one has a much more of a sort of happy ending, really. Up the Junction's a bit of a tragic tale of this guy, trying to forge a relationship and, having a child and so on. But he just ends up on his own at the end, thanks to having gone to hell. In Vicky Verky, he does sort of go to hell, but the song has a happy ending, which makes it quite sweet. And there is a theory that it's the same couple as the one from Up the Junction. Not quite sure what I think about that, but anyway, from song by song, Jim Drury, the author, actually starts by asking Chris and Glenn, he says it concerns the same characters from Up the Junction, but 5 years earlier in their lives. There we go. So not a sequel, but a prequel. And Chris says loosely. And he compares it to Bob Dylan, says it has that Bob Dylan kind of lyrical spread about it. And that was also true of Up the Junction as well. That was definitely a bit of a Dylan-influenced song. Yeah, Jim Drury highlights some of the brilliant imagery in this song. That line with her hair up in his fingers, the fish and chip smell lingers. And Chris says, I don't get fish and chip fingers in my hair very often these days. The title, Vicky Verky, I think for years people assumed it was the name of the character in the song, but Chris finally elucidated and he says, I don't know where it comes from in history, but it means the opposite of something. Vicky Verky, I think it might be South East London slang or vernacular, meaning vice versa, essentially. Yeah, Chris says if that boat there was going backwards down the river, you might say that it was going a bit Vicky Verky. I rarely hear it these days. And then he confirms, actually, it's a South London phrase. Interestingly, Glenn says this is a song which Jools really hated. And then he says it's lyrically slightly twee in the way that Up the Junction isn't, which makes it less interesting to me. Musically, I don't think it's very good either. So it's one of those, I won't say many songs, but several songs that Chris and Glenn highlight through the years. Great Squeeze favourites, which Glenn and Chris are not particularly fond of. Glenn doesn't even rate Another Nail, I don't think. But we'll come to that another day. Anyway, this is a great song. It tells a lovely, sweet little story. I will read you the lyrics and we can enjoy the story together and marvel in Chris's wonderful wordplay. With her hair up in his fingers, the fish and chip smell lingers. Under amber street lamps, she holds the law in her hands. The moistness of the damp night falls silent through the lamplight. Although she's only 14, she really knows her courting. And up the railway sidings, there's him and her, they're lying, hand in hand they whisper, you're my missus, and I'm your mister. The moon is white and virgin, and she was on the turning. Remember your first nibble, when best friends wear so little. I'm not sure about that couplet, actually. Rhyming nibble with little. Slightly tenuous. Quite sweet, though. They really trooped the colours when walking with each other, and all her mates would giggle, as ladylike she'd wiggle. All along the high street they'd splash out on an ice cream. He He'd sometimes really treat her. Now, I always thought it was when he'd done his mother's meter. It says here, but he'd done his mother's meter. I always took that to mean that he would treat her, he would buy her something when he'd done his mother's meter, meaning when he'd stolen the money from the meter, the parking meter that his mother is responsible for. It's quite good, the reference to his mother's meter. It links back in my mind to lovely Rita, meter maid from Sergeant Pepper. Anyway, so he steals the money from the meter and then he gets caught, obviously, and then he went off to Borstal. He said that he was forced to, interesting rhyme, rob the flats of hi-fis because she was ill and she would cry. Each morning she got sicker, her mother sometimes hit her. If she'd have known the story, she would have been so sorry. It's interesting, in the middle eight of Up the Junction, the guy gets a job, doesn't he, in the depths of winter to buy some flowers for his wife or his partner who's pregnant by them. And here he's robbing hi-fis from flats in order to presumably help to pay for her upkeep. Wonderful bit about her mother sometimes hit her. If she'd have known the story, she would have been so sorry. So, her mother is clearly not aware that she's pregnant, and a bit of violence coming through there. Her mother sometimes hit her. It's extraordinary. What do you imagine now? Kind of slap across the face, or I don't know. Dark. He received a letter and admitted it. There was nothing else to do but get rid of it. Lonely in his dormitory, he'd sit and stare. If this is for real, and is it really fair? So he's in prison, he's in Borstal, which is a young offenders institute, was a young offenders institute, I think, in the UK. Gets the letter from her to say that she's pregnant, and they decide to go for an abortion. There's a great middle section which goes into this sort of fast-moving instrumental section with a bit of I must admit, a sort of plinky-plonky keyboard solo. I can sort of hear why Jools might not have liked that. It is slightly naff. And then the song ends. Summer came, so they went down to the coast in his tent. She cooked upon his primus and sampled local cider. She told him in his rucksack, I think I want that chance back to be perhaps the one who will forever love you. Great little rhyme there. Primus, which is a camping stove, rhymed with local cider. I think there's a few songs on this record which seem to share the same theme. Separate Beds, the young couple in that also go away to on holiday, and they stay in a hotel above the cliffs, I think, don't they? So there's quite a few songs on this record, I think, or at least those two anyway, which are clearly about two people in love. And I suppose Pulling Muscles as well is also a holiday song, that's kind of seaside romance. So these things seem to be concerning Chris at the time. I don't know whether he was enjoying a bit of a holiday whirlwind romance at the time or not. I think at this time he was probably just on the verge of getting married, I think, probably, for the first time. Anyway, Chris in Love, very inspiring, and a great little song in Vicky Verky, definitely a Squeeze classic. So let me know what you think of the song, and I'll be back soon. Take care, bye for now.